Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Southern Outdoorsman Podcast. A little bit different today. We're actually sitting here at the cabin on a little hunting trip and got a room full of guys around us. So real quick, I want everybody to introduce themselves, starting with old Mike.
The Dilla.
Well, who's the Dilla?
Michael Pike.
There you go.
Shane Parker.
Christopher Leppert.
Greg Maher.
Talon Neal.
There you go. Awesome. Unfortunately, Andrew is not up here. He kind of, so he had some stuff come up, so he can't be here on this episode, or really on the hunt. I think he might come up a little later in the week, but we're going to do kind of a little hunt recap. It's been a fun time hunting some January rut action. Christopher came I say Christopher, that's weird. Chris came all the way down from Ohio. By the way, just real quick, what's the biggest difference between an Alabama deer and an Ohio deer when it comes to size?
There's a lot of differences. Yeah, our deer are significantly bigger up there, but it's been a pretty humbling experience to come down here.
So let me ask you this. Think of like a 140 back home and the body size, maybe a 3.5, 4.5-year-old deer, maybe a 5.5-year-old deer, how big that is as a 140. Now imagine an Alabama buck, about 165 pounds to maybe 180, being the same size, what that would look like.
That thing would look like a king with a crown. That would be insane to see a deer of that size with that kind of rack.
Well, not to jump too far ahead, but we'll talk about what we have and have not seen on this hunt so far. Real quick, also, so Greg, you came in from South Carolina, so you made a little haul, also with Meadow Creek Mounts. So, by the way, we're going to, maybe, I don't know, we might have to do a turkey episode in the spring. I got to play my turkey episodes out anyways and talk some traveling hunting from another southerner. You also just got off a pretty cool little elk hunt. You had a little success it was Colorado, right?
Yep, that's right.
Opening day. Public land.
Shot a big one.
Yeah, shot an absolute giant.
That's the whole story, but no.
I mean, it's quick enough. Did you say, were you in a tree stand, by the way?
No.
No?
That was when I was telling you the other story about the bear.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Well,
that was a year before, though.
Colorado's actually, the only other person in here who's been to Colorado actually hunted was Chris, right?
Yeah.
How'd that trip go compared to?
It sucked. It's called hiking for $700.
It sucks the first few years. Well, it doesn't suck. It never sucks to be out west. But
no, it really doesn't. I shouldn't even say that. But
years.
The first year I went, I saw all the people out west. I'm running into this. All the locals give me this advice, and I'm like, oh yeah, the gospel of the Lord. So they're all telling me I got to be like 8 miles in and don't even look at a meadow. The elk will not be in the meadow. I go 2.5 miles in, and they're laying in the meadow 50 yards off of the main hiking trail near a lake where everybody goes is a gigantic cow and her 3 calves. Those are the elk that I have seen in 2 trips. I've never seen or heard a bull. I've hiked up and down and across mountains, and I'm like 4'5" basically, so it's not easy to do that. To get over the deadfall, and that's probably like, you talk about going out west, which you've been, and I don't know what your experience was like, but deadfall is it's
abundant.
Insane. Oh my God, I packed in by myself and found that there was no water in the canyon where I was. I dropped all my elevation. Oh, there's water down here. No, there's not. So then I spent all day long getting back up to the top, and it was literally like the side of the mountain is probably like a 50-degree angle. It is blanketed in dead pine needles, and you are stepping over pine trees, lodgepole pines left and right.
Every step takes a lot more energy.
It was terrible.
Over that stuff.
And again,
so don't go, guys. So there's more over-the-counter attacks for the rest of us, right?
Being a short guy is not easy out west.
Yeah. Oh, man. Also, again, kind of doing a recap, we're about to talk about this river bottom hunt that we've been doing here for the last few days. Talon, you've had a pretty good season. How many bucks have you killed, by the way?
2.
2 in Alabama?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Also, Michael Pike here, tagged out. So you're here for moral support, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, more or less.
More or less. I don't know what you've had success on this hunt before, and you're not giving us any hot tips. So
I'm trying to put you on spots, and nobody wants to go.
Well, listen, me and Seth might pick you up on it. I don't know. We might. I don't know. We might go somewhere else though. We're trying to figure out what we're going to be doing. And then Shane, since the last time you've been on, I think last time you were on, was that the Georgia hunt? Or?
Georgia hunt, yeah.
Okay, so a lot of things have progressed since then.
Yeah.
Talk to me real briefly. When it came into the season and everything, and we've had a lot of time that's kind of passed since the last time you came on. By the way, we had really good feedback from the episode we did in Georgia, talking about the whole thermals and thermal hubs and everything. You got to see how many questions we had written in about when he says a west-facing thermal hub. How is that again? Like, how is that faced? Just everything else. It was pretty interesting. But actually, I think we had 4 or 5 listener success stories come from that episode.
Wow. That's
Which is kind of cool.
Nice.
So guys actually took what you said, applied it, and had some success.
Awesome.
I did and did not have any success. So shame on you, Shane.
Shame on me. Got to stop giving information.
But anyways, you've had a pretty crazy fall, and we'll probably do a little bit more of an update maybe with you at another time, because I want to talk to you about some postseason scouting, because that's something I want to try to maybe focus on a little bit this year and learn some areas that maybe had a little success in, but want to kind of expand, some more knowledge and everything else. So anyway, and then Michael Pike, you just tagged out, man, just quick and easy, because you haven't been on since. Actually, no, you were.
I was on the campground.
The campground. So that was really the last episode, which came out like sometime in October.
And he finished hunting like a week later.
Yeah.
I killed everything like in that little span.
Yeah, there was.
Hey, I'm just glad I recovered all of them.
That's that's true.
Yeah.
And also,
he's giving me. So we started off the season. He was trying to outdo me with the scouting, and I think he was pretty successful. Now he's trying to outdo my shooting skills too. So like, I'm gonna be number 2. Like,
I keep missing. But I mean, what is the old saying? You miss 100% of the shots you
There
don't
you
take,
go.
so you might as well just.
I'm just trying to keep up with them.
hey, I'm right there with you, Talon. God.
Talon's like, just let me follow y'all with a gun.
Yeah.
I gotta have Shane take an off day so I can get more steps than him.
yeah.
I've quit. I didn't walk any yesterday, so you should be good. That's when he was saying that about steps. I was thinking, so my 12,000 would be like your 30,000.
Oh yeah, it's definitely visible when I'm with any other human being in the woods.
Yeah, I would have to go back to the truck 2 or 3 times to get you.
Probably.
Dang,
be more
Chris,
out.
you gonna take that?
Hey,
you remember he's an Alabama fan too.
Yeah.
Roll Tide.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
How
All
are
you
the
gotta say is,
Alabamians
"Go
doing?
Blue."
How's those elephants faring? I'm gonna have like 30,000 people ready to kill me.
That's pretty accurate. Shane, it's been an interesting season. But the cool thing is, where all these other people, kind of like Chris, well, I guess y'all still have quite a bit of season left because Ohio goes for a long time. But a lot of people, if you're in the Midwest, season's kind of it's
dwindling way
yeah,
down
it's
for
dwindling, if
almost
not-
everybody.
Yeah, if not, coming to a conclusion here. Us in Alabama and some guys in Mississippi, Arkansas, Georgia closes in like a week or so. But we still have a lot of season left, which is kind of cool. And then also like the RUT, which goes into kind of a factor for where we're hunting. We decided to do this big deer camp, hunting big river bottom, and just, bounce around from different pieces of public, or really bounce around from the piece of public and seeing what we can get into. And Chris, everybody here got invited to come down. Well, Talon, I think you were already coming, but we had, this whole group put together. And Jacob Emery was here. He left a little early, so he wasn't able to join us on the podcast. But it's been a very mixed bag of observations and opportunities, could we say?
You can just say it. You can say it. Go ahead.
So
Yankee boy came down and got his butt whipped. It's all right.
Well, I'll let you say it then. I mean, you already did, but it's interesting because the thing is, the South is something very interesting because just the habitat diversity and just the difference of the woods. And Chris, this is something I want to ask you. Before you came down here, I'm sure you already had in your mind what these, what the river bottom would look like, what the terrain, the habitat would look like. How similar or how off was your imagination of what this was actually going to look like?
Significantly off in multiple ways. So where I was yesterday, I didn't expect it to be so dry and yet have so many little waterways in it. I thought it would be feast or famine with either, I didn't think I'd be like, oh, dry, crunchy leaves and hard ground. And then all of a sudden, here's another ditch I got to cross full of water. So, and then, I've said this 1,000 times since I've been here, but I can't get over the mud. I knew it, but you don't know it until you go out there and battle it. And my first night trying to get my kayak back into the water took like probably 30 minutes just trying to get it into the water because the water's that deep and there's this much mud or more. And I'm just shoving it into the mud and it's creating like a suction effect, like when you get your boot down in there. And so now I can't get the damn thing back out. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to have to text them and let them know I'm going to be a little longer. But, yeah, the mud was pretty overwhelming and just, it's completely different down here, man.
So you also got to experience, I think, y'all don't have a Chinese privet up in Ohio, do you?
No.
What's that like?
We have, so I will say we have something pretty similar, which is the autumn olive.
Mm-hmm.
But the autumn olive is, in my opinion, a little tougher to get through because it hangs lower and there's like little thorns and stuff on it. The privet's a little easier to get through, but it grows thick. It is like when you told me there's a wall, it's a wall. Couldn't get over that. Never seen that in my life. So creates a hard edge though.
Yeah, it does. That it does. Which brings into where I want to get Greg into this conversation because Greg, you hunted Alabama last year, hunted the same river bottom.
Yep.
This year, from what you told me, it's complete 180 for you when it comes to opportunity and everything.
Yeah, I was around for about 3 days last year, and I'm not a ground guy, and I never got in a tree. Scouted around a good bit, found a little bit of sign, but this year's been completely different. Just a little bit different area, a little bit different habitat. Hunting kind of real close to the edge of the privet, and I've seen 3 shooters, so got one more morning. So hopefully I'll get one in the morning.
Which kind of brings in the point I was going to bring up with the privet. Explain when it comes to like the sign, like what did you see specifically when you went into this area that like you didn't see last time that was like so impressive? Like, hey, I've got to sit here because the thing is, you're probably going to kill. Well, you climbed one tree. I don't know how many times that tree might die.
I climbed that tree about 4 times, but I've hunted 5 different trees in that one area. And if I would have been in the one that I was in this morning all week, then I would have already shot 2 of them. So they've both walked right by it. But once they get by there, they go different ways. So it's kind of honing in on them, hopefully.
But that area is a privet thicket that's got quite a bit of sign around it, right?
Yep.
So I'm just curious because you found something that I've kind of found, but not to that extent. What sign did you see that actually was like, hey, I'm going to hone in on this?
All right. So the first morning, the first day I got here, I scouted the afternoon and just found a lot of rubs at the back of a kind of an open area. The privet was kind of more open in there. You can maybe see 50 yards on the ground. When you climb up, you can see 150 yards in 2 directions, and then you can see a wall of privet. So I climbed there the first day because when I saw all these rubs in this area, I just tiptoed out of there. Got in there that next morning, just saw a few does, and then I just pushed in further. So really what I'm kind of in a pinch point where it's real thick privet and there's more rubs, trails, scrapes. Not many of the scrapes are being worked right now, but the few that are right there in that one little pinch point where I've climbed basically 3.5 days I've hunted there. So
talk to me about that first encounter with that first shooter and like how that played out.
Yeah, so I was sitting there and I see a doe coming. She's going to come right through the pinch point, and she's probably 50 yards at this point, and she just kind of disappears behind a tree. So I just watch her, and she doesn't move like 10 yards in about 10 minutes, and I'm kind of wondering what's going on over there. So she ends up going on the edge of the swamp, kind of walking away from me. Well, then I see the buck just standing about 15 yards, just kind of staring at her, and she still is barely moving. So I'm standing up at this point once I see the buck and realize it's a shooter. And he just looks at her, and he'll kind of look around. He doesn't really move. Well, I start hearing water walk, and I'm like, why is she walking through the water? There's this good dry land, but these deer do not care. 6, 8, 10 inches of water might as well be dry ground. So, even though most of the signs are out there crossing, if you go to the edge of the water, they're crossing there just as much. So they went through the privet at 40 yards. I was drawn back, and they just wouldn't stop, and that's the thick privet that I could literally at 10 yards in this one area I can't even shoot. So it's kind of open around it, and there's a few trails that I could shoot, but where they went through was 40 yards. That's when he kind of started to push her a little bit, but it seemed like he was locked down, like it was about to happen, even though I haven't really seen much other rutting activity as far as chasing or anything. But that one just seemed like there was they were going to go somewhere, and he was just going to lock her down out on kind of like a little point he could lock her down on in the open around it with some thick privet. So I think that's what happened. I sat there all day with no food.
Yeah, I know. That's what
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of get to. So
Yeah.
you decided to stick out. And I remember that morning because we woke up and from the camp and rolled it out. I'll make my sandwiches. Like, man, I'm going to have my food in the boat.
said I'm gonna come
I'll come back to the truck.
Yeah.
And get my food and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And, just happened. You getting some pretty good activity. And next thing you know, he's starving afterwards.
Yeah, but I mean, when the area they went to, like I just knew they were going to come back by because it was kind of. I didn't think they were going to keep going. They might have stayed out there all day. Like I said, I could only see about 40 yards the direction they went. But yeah, I sat there and I was pretty hungry by the time we got back together that night because it was just us that night.
Yeah.
No one else was here.
Yeah. So, that's kind of interesting. But this can kind of come into play as we're talking a little bit more about the hunt and everything is, you kind of stuck with the spot and got other observations on other shooters in this same really, to be honest, a really small area.
Right.
That's just all this activity. And it's like, I wasn't terribly far from you.
Right.
And didn't see anything for 2 da's. I saw a spike. And then Talon shows
Well,
up.
luckily he went this
I
morning.
know, that's what I'm saying. It shows up and, had a pretty good encounter with Talon. What was the situation? Because originally you were going to go to a different area, right?
Yeah, I was going to go to that one spot you were telling me about, and then he's like, "You want to go for a boat ride?" I'm like, "Might as well."
Yeah.
And so I'm sure he said something about the area, but it kind of went through one ear, out the other. And then I dropped me off on the bank, and I was looking at the map, and I was like, okay, I ain't got time to scout. I want to be sit down. So on the map, I could see there's a good funnel connecting two pieces. And I was like, okay, I'll go there. That'll be my best chance not scouting. And when I got in there, it's probably 15, 16, maybe 30 minutes after I sat down. I had a little basket rack buck work beside me to my right, probably 10 yards from me. And then nothing else till about 7:15. Then I caught a big 6 working along, going to that point, probably 20 yards from me. But he's in a bunch of that thick privet.
Mm-hmm.
And as dim as it was, I couldn't pick out any shooting lanes in there. So I was like, okay, I'll grunt at him. He'll come along this funnel and stay in cover, get downwind of me, and I have a shot. Well, he did the complete opposite of what I thought, and he went in the green field, 100 yards out, got my win, and took off. But, yeah, it was a learning experience. But
Yeah. Also, did you scout around much after that?
I did afterwards, yeah.
So that area when I was in there's tons of tracks, trails, and there's some rubs in there, but like all the rubs I found, it's nothing like Greg where you're at, where it's just a lot of fresh sign. It's like a lot of sign seemed like it had been made, 2 weeks ago, probably 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, and where that buck was headed, it was actually a bedding point. But when I grunted at him, that got his interest to come out, see what was going on. But there's a lot of little, like, early season little points out there when the crops are up or think they're hanging out at.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just when I didn't get any of y'all's messages, by the way, this morning for whatever reason, and all of a sudden they all popped up, and I'm like,
How does
scrolling through.
Jacob never have service out of everybody?
I don't know, but like all of a sudden,
How convenient.
I just like leaned out of the tree, away from the tree, because me and Seth were sky high in a giant red oak, not in the best cover. And anyways, I get all these messages, and I saw where you like, hey, saw a buck, and I didn't realize what time it was, so I thought it was like I thought these messages just came through. I'm like, oh man, they're moving. It's 9:30 in the morning, and,
No.
and then I'm
I
then I'm looking at the date and look at the times. I'm like, crap, that was at 6:25 and 7:15. I'm like, okay.
See, he was on the ground, and he had already seen a deer before I got settled into the tree, and I was up before I could shoot, but he had already seen one. So
Yeah.
Very good morning.
Can you pass some luck over here, like rub my hat or something? And maybe we'll have that opportunity tomorrow. And then, Chris, give me a little rundown from on your side of stuff, because I'm trying to get to the guys who's been hunting for a couple of days. Because Shane, you just got here today, yeah, and Pike, you came in yesterday. But Chris, what about you?
Well, I put in 5 miles yesterday, and I saw a deer about 200 yards away. Got into this area where there was a lot of blowdowns, super thick cover, lots of water along it. And I thought, man, this is going to be the spot. And I did find a lot of buck sign in there, but anybody who's ever tried to find a buck in November in the Midwest or down here now, you generally want to go looking for the does. So I thought, well, I'm going to keep going and try to look for some of these privet thickets that you guys talk about or something. And I found some privet, but I don't think I would classify it as a thicket so much as like a wall bordering some private where I felt like the deer would filter off and come in and feed. And I did find one like Nuttall, I guess, that little tiny acorn dude. There was some decent feed sign under it, but never did have a deer come in last night. And then this evening, got on the edge of a swamp, had an island across with a lot of like tall native browse, super thick island, and was just in kind of like what he said, like this little funnel where I felt like deer would filter into, and again found oaks with better feed sign actually. I thought, man, I better sit here, and no deer. So I don't really know what I'm doing down here.
So let me, and this is kind of a general question for everybody, and kind of take it, as y'all want. But like, Chris, what was like your game plan going into it? Like, what were you like expecting? Because I mean, you kind of looked at some maps, but like, what were you like? What have you been trying to look for? And like, what are you finding? But like, what's not paying off? Because what I want to try to do with like part of this episode is like some like lessons learned, because I've learned some stuff too of like what not to do. So
well, I think the deer are spread out a lot more here than they are at home for sure. I didn't think I'd walk anywhere near that far and not find deer, basically. Like, I've seen some while walking around, but one each time. Like, not jumping 5. I'm not jumping does. I'm jumping doe. So, I honestly just expected there to be a lot more deer. Now, talking to Andrew and some other people, seems like it's pretty pockety here, where like when you're in them, you're really in them, and when you're not, kind of like elk hunting maybe. But it's just very humbling, I guess, because back home I would not. It would be so easy to get on deer. You could walk almost anywhere and jump up deer at home. So it's completely different. But there's also not as much habitat at home. Like, there's a lot of places a deer can go here. So
I'll say this: you just pumped up a lot of Southern boys' egos by saying
probably. Hey,
Trevor's over here like, yes,
you
sir.
gotta
Let's
call
go
it
to the
how it
Midwest,
is, man.
baby.
It's
No,
not.
we already know.
It's not easy.
And then, I mean, Greg, what were you originally looking for? I mean, of course, you kind of found this one spot, but like, what were you trying to look for? Because you scouted some other pieces too before you kind of settled on this one spot. But like, what were you trying to find in order to feel confident?
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of knew what the area looked like. Unfortunately, Chris didn't. He didn't have any idea what it was going to look like when he got here.
Mm-hmm.
I hunted the same sort of area last year. So, just looking for thick, just looking for buck sign, really. That's pretty much it. There's plenty of food everywhere. Last week on the podcast, was it Jake? What was the guy from North Carolina?
Jacob Leishan.
Yeah, he was talking about how the deer in the southeast, they don't have to worry about food at all. So look, this time of year, looking for the thick cover is where it's at. So
Yeah, and I'll say this: going into this hunt, I was thinking the same thing, like thick cover, because I've hunted around here before at different times of the year, but I knew thick cover was going to play a factor. But what I was going into, and this is what kind of bit me in the butt, I was trying to focus on what I thought was pretty good rut funnels, kind of pinched down with water and stuff like with with the river and everything, and it just has not paid off.
Yeah.
There's some areas that like we've gotten to good sign, and the problem is, and this is something I've realized because this is the second time I've hunted river bottoms this year. I hunted Arkansas river bottoms, and then now here in Alabama some river bottoms, and it's like going back and forth between the two. One thing I've realized is like in those river bottoms, even if there's no rain, the ground is typically so soft.
yeah.
You see tracks really well, which is kind of deceptive of how many deer are coming through an area and how often they are. Because you're like, I found some tracks actually where Talon went, or some trails where Talon went, and I'm like, this is incredible. Like, I told a couple of you guys, I'm like, a blind guy could follow this trail because it looks 3 feet wide and walled out. But that could be 4 does coming through there, once a day, and the ground's so soft after 4 or 5 days, it looks like that.
Yep.
Instead of there being 50 deer there and a bunch of bucks. So I think that's one thing I kind of took for granted, where I was like stopping at some of that sign instead of like pushing further and some of that stuff, which we still have a few days left. But that's something I feel like kind of bit me in the butt the first 3 or 4 days on this trip, is like I'd find some of that, maybe find some rubs closer to it, and I'm like, okay, this is good enough. And it wasn't. Like maybe you have an encounter, like a couple sits now, haven't seen a deer. And it's like, well, they're coming through at some point. It might be 2 o'clock in the morning, but, it's not where they're at right here, right now. And that's been like a really big takeaway I've seen. Because like typically in like hill country, it's like you don't find a ton of tracks depending on like where you're at, like maybe a creek crossing, something like that. And then after like a fresh rain, just because, how the soil types are typically. But it's like down the river bottoms is like, it's cool to see a track, but it's also one of those things that's like, you need to take it with a grain of salt of like where that deer is coming from, where is he going? Is it actually, are you finding a track in an area that, first off, can you backtrack, or can you follow where he went? And is it in like a place that more than likely you're actually going to see a buck during daylight? And all these other factors. But on the flip side, Shane, you sent us a text message today. You were cutting some tracks, and found something pretty interesting at the end of the track. So, walk us through that with the scouting aspect. I'm interested in that story, but also like your game plan afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, initially when I got here, I just went to one specific area that I'd kind of pinned, and I immediately cut a big buck track that was really fresh. Like I could tell it's fresh, and when it petered out, that's where the buck expired. And I found basically cart tracks that led right to where they had picked him up at. So,
well, in a little more detail, I think you put in the message, it looked like at one point he jumped or did.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell where he'd stopped in the mud, and right then he bolted. Like you could see, he bolted, and there was specks of blood, and so he got tagged right there. And I didn't follow it anymore. I knew at that point in time, I'm chasing the ghost here. And it wasn't very far. I hit the road, and there was a cart track, and they pulled him right to the truck and loaded him up. So, and that was probably yesterday. The mud was still fresh. So it was yesterday afternoon when they killed that buck.
Interesting situation. I had the same thing happen to me a couple days ago. I went walking on part of the public and hiked way back into the spot. I was doing a loop, and I came upon a really good rub line. I'm like, man, it's super fresh rubs. And I start following this rub line, kind of looking down, looking up, kind of scouting my way back. All of a sudden, I look up. I'm like, man, those leaves sure look red. And I walk over there, and there's a blood spot that's probably 3 feet wide where someone had deer died. They gutted it right there. It's probably been a couple days old. The guts were gone, but all the blood's there. And I start looking, you can see the drag marks where the guys drug it out. And I'm like, literally, there's a big rub 6 feet from where they gutted that deer.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing with this one was I could tell where he was going. He was working a scrape line, like along the edge, like just inside the privet, just outside like it was like a field, a wood lot, privet on both sides, and he was between the two. And so I was like, well, he was working that, and they killed him yesterday, so that's probably what they're doing. And that's just what I've been looking for since then, is those edges, like those little gaps between the fields and stuff like that.
And one thing you mentioned was you were finding the scrapes he was working, but he wasn't pawing the scrapes. He was just hitting the licking branch.
Yeah, he was just working the licking branches. Looks like. Yeah,
that's what the buck yesterday, the second shooter that I saw yesterday, was doing. And I even went and looked at the scrape, and you could hardly even tell he'd been there. It was only the licking branch.
So this is something I've been wanting to ask everybody. And Greg, I want to ask you first because you have a ton of experience. You were telling me this, like you kind of grew up hunting from a boat and
Yeah.
boat access, getting to spots. What if you were to explain river bottoms to somebody who doesn't hunt river bottoms? What is the advantages and disadvantages of like hunting river bottoms and boat access and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So, you mean just specifically for boat access? Of course, it's quieter, all that. But being down in the river bottoms to me just seems like when you're seeing these huge rubs, stuff like that, where you get up in the hill, I just feel way more confident when I'm in an area like that. Even though, I mean, the deer can be anywhere. You just feel the confidence is what really helps a lot. So.
What's the disadvantages you'd see with like hunting river bottoms? Because you hunt hill country too.
Yeah, well, like you were saying, easy to see sign. You might sit somewhere where you think is great, and it's really not. When if you really know what to look for up in the, I mean, most of the big deer I've ever killed were on feed trees. So I'm, a lot of those were in river bottoms or up in the hills a little bit, but it's just a different way to read the sign. So it's just harder to see sometimes when you find that you really know you're in a good spot.
Now, Talon, I want to ask you the same question too, but again, your first sit, you see a shooter, so you might not have a lot of disadvantages at this point. But do you have much other experience hunting river bottoms before?
No, this was my second time up here. Really, honestly, second time river bottom. But the advantages I say with it is you can find a buck a lot easier, because like where I usually hunt, you don't find a buck track. You gotta keep finding until you find that next rub or you find that next trail.
Yeah.
Versus here, I can be like go to like the field and be like, "There's a buck track, buck in the area. Let's find that trail where he's in and out." And that's been really, it's made it a lot easier and gives you confidence. Like, yeah, I know he's here.
Yeah.
I know he's here now because there's still muddy water floating in it. Versus not having that at all.
Now, let me ask: what you hunt a lot of hill country?
Mhm.
So, what would you see as a disadvantage with hunting bottoms compared to, like, say, hill country? Is there any disadvantage that you would have?
Yeah, definitely. Because coming from what I usually do, I'm like, oh man, there's a buck track, bam. Well, he's probably using a lot of this, and that's where I think a lot of people could mess up. They say, oh, there's a buck trail here. Well, that may just be an evening trail. That might just be a every now and then trail. Find where he's going in and out. And I think you could get messed up just focusing on that tracks and all that sign, because it does stay there much longer than it would in hill country.
Shane, I want to ask you the same thing. What is, you hunt a lot of hill country as well. What do you see as a advantage, but also disadvantage when it comes to hunting river bottoms?
Well, the advantage is, like you said, the sign is more readily readable. Like you can read the sign easier. The disadvantage is there's nothing in a river bottom. There's no swirling wind for a buck to go seek out. So you have to find those little intricate, like habitat edges and things like that they seek out, the thicker cover. Whereas like in the hill country, a buck will go seek out an area where the thermals are doing this at a certain time when he can take advantage of it. Or there's swirling winds in a certain like thermal hub, and he'll hang out in that because he can feel safe. Whereas you're on the river bottoms, that doesn't really exist, and the only thing you got to go on is like the habitat itself and wind direction, to me. So that's a disadvantage of it, is you don't have really that to play off of, that advantage of thinking, well, I can go find somewhere where he's going to hang out in. So it's got a lot more to do. You probably got to cover. It sounds backward, but you probably got to cover a lot more ground in river bottoms than you would think you could in the mountains, because in the mountains you can go hit certain areas and you can just eliminate like whole areas that there's not going to be a buck in, because it's either wide open timber or they're just not going to travel through it. And here they can travel anywhere. If it's walkable by us, it's walkable by them.
And water doesn't.
And water doesn't affect them one bit.
No. I think again we got a couple people behind the camera that don't have mics, but Miles is over here, and he was talking about just one of his cousins, duck hunter, like seeing deer swimming like just like across one of these big creeks and everything. And it's like the more and more duck hunters I talk to, it's like the way they describe like buck encounters is like almost like they're aquatic. Like, every time they're in the water, like they got decoys out, the bucks swim through the decoy spread. They're slipping down the edge of a slough, in 2 feet of water or whatever, or swimming across a slough or swimming across a creek. And it kind of takes into consideration, like when you talk to like more duck hunters of like where and when they see bucks, it's like they're in the water typically.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah, I mean, it was like today. Everywhere that I seen, like I thought I'll get on a dry patch, and that's got to be where they're at. And all the trails are just right along the edge, right in the mud, And when you get on that dry patch, there's nothing, Like that one that the buck that I did end up jumping went to a little dry patch, but I mean it wasn't no bigger than where we're sitting right here, and everything around it was just flooded out, knee deep water,
Do you jump a buck today?
Yeah, that big one that was in the field.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, ended up
Starts a message thread.
service.
Okay.
Doesn't
yeah.
partake in the
taking that.
message
Yeah,
thread.
I don't remember seeing that message. I just remember him saying, "Hey, there's a big deer here." So
No, I ended up going and getting something to eat, coming back after I'd seen him crossing the field, and I was like, he doesn't have any options to really go anywhere else. Like he's kind of pinned in that one area, unless he wanted to swim across the river. And I didn't figure that was an option. Seeing as how he's got a doe with him, he's trying to push her into one area. So I ended up walking back down in there like an hour later, and he was on the only like patch of dry. Well, he wasn't. He was standing in the water, but he had her pushed up on a dry patch. I'm assuming because she blew out the one way and he went the other way.
interesting. All right, Chris, I got to ask you, advantages, disadvantages for hunting river bottoms.
Well, it's interesting hearing everybody talk about this because back home, everything I'm hunting is pretty tight, and it's actually sets up a lot more like hill country. So I actually don't find any disadvantages other than the work you have to do to access in and out, portaging and stuff like that. It sucks, but I mean, you can literally control your thermals. Nothing can see or smell you. You can get in and get out, and you can generally read how the buck's going to use a drainage ditch or a secondary slope or whatever to come down, cross the river, whatever he's going to do. Here, I'd have to agree 100%. It's like talking to Dan Infald or something hunting the marshes. I'm learning a completely different way of thinking about thermodynamics down here. I can feel my thermals pulling to the water in the evening. Just all the different little intricacies like that. If you don't know that right away and don't know to pay attention to that, which a lot still don't, that'd be a huge disadvantage.
I talked to somebody who hunts this religiously, and he said that and he's hunted this for 25 years. And he said that, and this is why I think I'm seeing so many tracks around the water, is because those thermals, the water is pulling that thermal, and that's where the deer naturally are. And he said, if you see tracks away from the water, he said, you can guarantee that's at night. If it's anywhere away from the water, he said, you can just about bank on it that it's nighttime. And he said, but everything around the water is pretty much going to be your daytime travel.
Do you think
That is the juice of the podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
Do you think that's
I mean,
kind
me,
of
that's somebody that's hunted it for, and I had no clue he hunted it. And he's like, oh, yeah, where are you going? I was like, I'm going here. He's like, well, I've hunted that for 25 years. This is what they do.
That light bulb went off in my head, and then you literally said it. I'm
Why
like,
are we just now? hearing this?
Yeah, what do you do? Watch you didn't put that in the group message.
I just learned it last night. That's
would have
why
been a
I came
great
up here.
message 3 days ago, Shane.
Yeah.
do you think that's
That
kind of
was
like
that
a
was like literally 12 hours ago.
like kind of like a
information.
side of a ridge thing in hill country is kind of what they're doing on the side of the water. The same concept.
The top third of the ridge, catching the thermals,
Yeah.
same exact thing.
That's what he said. There's just those big pockets of water just pulls the thermals right into it, and they just hang around it. And that's where I've seen, the deer today.
It was crazy too because trying to relate things to hill country as best I can because it's really kind of all I know using terrain. Sitting in that big draw yesterday, well, the wind was pushing up it all day long, and I'm like, all right, well, sun got behind the trees, right back towards the freaking water. I'm like, geez, oh Pete's okay. Here we go. I got you. It's a big learning experience for me. I've never hunted a place this big. We don't have water like this back home at all. Not even close.
Michael Pike, I got to ask you the same question before we move on. What's your thoughts on advantages and disadvantages for hunting river bottoms?
I'd probably say you can't really get away from pressure in a river bottom.
That's a disadvantage.
Because people are willing to go. Also, a disadvantage is there are certain places that you can't easily access. It's either not big enough for a kayak or a boat, and too deep for a pair of waders.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd have to pack something in there and set it up, or if you did something like a kayak, have to drag it a really long ways. So that would be a disadvantage. Advantage, it's just easy. I mean, the trails are just laid out everywhere they're going, and if you're able to figure out what that trail is going to, you're able to figure out paths of travel. So, I don't know. To me, it's like a road map. You just got to figure out, what, I don't know, destinations or whatever that each of these little, trails go to. Totally different than where I'm hunting right now.
Yeah. Real quick, this is for everybody here. You talked about the whole trail thing, like being easy to kind of see point of travel, and I agree with that. It's just like, it's also like where me and Seth set up today. It's like there's 3 trails that weren't 10 feet from each other, paralleling each other. I'm like, what are they doing? Like, why would they take one over the other in this one spot? And it's not like they're necessarily funneled, inside a 30-foot wide area in order to have, 3 trails 10 feet wide from each other. But they were, and there's tracks in all of them. And, it's a little complicated there. But does anyone here think, like, based off what they've seen and experienced as well, are these bucks running a lot of these major trail systems, or does it seem like kind of like in hill country they're kind of running like a separate trail kind of off to the side of where you're seeing more of the doe traffic?
Say yes and no. I think it varies how the terrain lays out, or like what I seen today is there was a bunch of doe tracks here, but I've only seen 2 bucks in this spot, but the doe tracks were there. The sign was there that does were coming back and forth. However, that one buck did split off from that and didn't go completely through that funnel. So,
here's something too. Sometimes when you get those trails that split off, sometimes they can be in feeding areas. You got does that travel, kind of in behind each other, but like whenever you get to like a more of like a feeding area, they tend to like branch out and feed around. The only reason I noticed that is because we were down in South Alabama and we got that snow that year, and I was able to follow all these tracks, and there was a really, really heavy trail, and then all of a sudden it branched off, and then I was able to see exactly like what they're actually feeding on. But that would be my guess is one of the reasons why. Maybe different water levels or different bedding sites. I mean, any of that could play in.
Shane, you got something?
I mean, it's like the location that I went in second today, and I'm going to go in there tomorrow. There's a big swamp right in the middle of it, and it's like there's just fingers of trails coming out of that swamp, and they're going. I can see tracks going in and out, in and out, in and out. The same thing with all the rubs. The rubs are going in and out of it. So it's like he said, like Michael said about. It's almost like those deer know those areas that nobody can go into, and they're the swampiest, nastiest stuff that there is. So instead of looking at it like when you hunt this area or hunt an area like this, instead of looking for like that thick cover, you're almost looking for like the areas where you can't get a boat or you can't get in with waders. Those are the areas that I think are holding the deer, and it's not so much the thick cover that's holding them. It's like I could see through that swamp, but it's just so big that I can't see all the way through it, and I can't get into it. But they can. I mean, they have no problem getting in there. And there may be a little high spot somewhere in there. It's just like marsh hunting. Like there's just these probably little pockets where they can go seek out and lay down and bed in. But unless you're walking through that, you're not going to know it, So I think instead of looking at it like, oh, I got to find a real thick area where they're going to bed up into, it's probably going to be those swampy areas like a marsh or something
Tough
like that.
to access,
it's going to be really hard to access for anybody. You're not going to walk through it. You can't pull a boat through it, and that's probably where your bucks and most of your does are at.
I'm trying to think of examples of stuff I've ran into that was set up like that from this hunt. That's an interesting point. It's kind of like so a past guest that we had on by the time this episode came out or has come out, it's been a few weeks ago. Jacob Leishan, Greg, you just mentioned him earlier in the episode. He mentioned on some of his public he hunts in North Carolina. He hunts a lot of river bottom stuff and like these big open river bottoms. And he's like, it's a transitional area where they're kind of going from thick cover to thick cover, and they'll kind of go through these bottoms. But also at certain times of the year, they'll bed in those bottoms in like little isolated cover where like they can see you coming from a long ways away. You can't see them, but that buck can see you, and it makes it super hard to try to go and kill him with a bow because he can see through 500 yards of wide open timber. But he's just bedding like a blow down, a brush top, something like that. So the only time you'd see him maybe is if he jumped up and maybe you get a glimpse of him, but more than likely he's going to slip out the backside before you ever, get close enough to lay eyes on him.
Yeah, like I found beds today, and that's the only place I'd found beds was in just like wide open. Like it was like grass that was like less than knee high, and it was just open. And that's the only place I found, like, I know that's a buck bed, like I could see it there. And looking back at it, when I walked up, like he's just off the side of where he made a rub line, and he had a bed right there, but with a log back up against his back. But behind that was a big open field. So he could sit there with like 25 feet between him and the field and look out over he could see 300 yards in front of him all the way to a road, the only access in there. So, he probably was laying there when I walked in,
That's a good point, because that's one thing I noticed about a disadvantage to flatland is I feel really naked out there because there's nothing to hide me. I mean, you can see at least 100 yards at all times, and there's no breakup. You run your white light, they're seeing it for no telling how long. There's a 500-yard long field.
Speak about the white light. Me and Seth had a situation. We set up this morning in this tree, and we're getting it, and we got in. It took us a little bit longer getting this gigantic red oak than I thought it would. And we finally get all hung up. It's gray light now. And all of a sudden, I see truck lights. And I'm like, there ain't a road. It looks like this truck was 100 yards from us. And there was not a road anywhere close to that distance. There was a road further than that, probably 350 yards. And you could see it like plain as day. It's pulling like a utility trailer. And you could see the whole thing. And I'm like, are we sitting? Like, am I like messed up on the maps, like looking at Onyx? I'm like, there's no way. But you could see the light all the way through. But when the sun came up, when it was, got good light, there was enough like obstruction. Like I can't see that far, but you could see light that far. It threw me. Dude, I was looking over there. I'm like, did we set up right next to someone's driveway that I can't see on the map? But it's like just the light would penetrate so far through that cover. But when the sun came up, it's like I couldn't see. You could see maybe 100 yards through some of that stuff. But we're 20 foot per tree, but when you get on the ground, I can't see 50 yards. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. Talon, you brought that up.
I've walked up on 2 deer though in the dark here, with the green light, whether you use white, green, whatever. But that's what I had on, and one was bedded under my tree when I got there one morning, and then yesterday evening I pushed a little too far past the spot that I talked to you about for like 2 days. Knew I should hunt it. Went past it, and it kind of looked okay, and I hunted, didn't see anything. And then when I was walking out, there was literally a deer standing in the swamp. I stopped because my phone buzzed, and he was 10 yards from me, and he was probably going to let me walk by, honestly, because I was kind of shoot down this little road, and he went tearing through the water. And should have hunted there. So then I hunted there today and just saw 3 does. So.
It happens. Absolutely. Real quick, we're going to get to a point here wrapping up, but we got to talk about some camp shenanigans. Greg, talk to us about firewood here. Actually, maybe Michael Pike should talk to us about firewood.
Well, so we showed up. I bought, I talked to Jacob before I came. I was like, should I get some firewood? He said, yeah, everyone can just bring some firewood. Well, I didn't bring any. So I bought some at the camp store. We could barely get it to light, and Jacob says, well, I've got a box that's been seasoned for 2 years. So we tried with some of that. Jacob Emery will tell you it didn't work. We tried all.
What do you mean it didn't work?
Well, we had to blow on it about every minute. Everything we could find, we tried to put on it. So then the next night, Chris was here. No, the next night was just me and you. It was the same deal. We had some ashes, some coals already started, some maybe dried out logs. Most of them would sizzle. Third night was kind of the same deal when Chris got here. And then last night, they even went to buy firewood halfway through the fire. We had a fire. What was the log you put on there?
The fire log?
Yeah.
It's some fire starter from like Walmart.
So it's supposed to burn for 3 hours. Yeah. It burned for 2 or 3 hours with our wood on top of it, but literally our wood would still not burn. It was just caving it out where the other was burning under it. So
Yeah.
Miles said he got some wood, so maybe we'll find out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then we actually had to resort to him putting his
Yeah,
fan
he
on the
put
fire
fan
to
on
keep it
And
lit.
That
Yeah.
kept us warm, but that wood just burned down so fast.
Yeah.
Pike, what's your take?
Yeah. That was a hot mess.
We were surprised the
Sounds
gas
like a
station
cold
was.
mess.
Did you go to the?
Yeah, it was.
He said season. I'm pretty sure it was soaking.
Yeah.
See,
It
this
was
would
soaking
sizzle.
in water for 2 years.
Yeah.
I said
Was
I
it
could have went out there in the lake and grabbed a grabbed a log that had been there, and it would have burned faster than what
He
brought
meant
us.
seasoned with like Italian seasoning,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
ranch or something.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah.
So did you find firewood at a gas station when you? Because that was like
It was
10
wood. It
It
was
was
wood.
9:30, 10
Oh,
o'clock.
the very last bundle, and I swear, each one of those things weighed 5 pounds.
Yeah, that was heavy.
They were waterlogged.
Yeah.
Waterlogged.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You bought cypress.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you got some. You get some. What do they call it? Driftwood out of the river.
I said it's got to be better than what he's got.
Well, when you put the fan to it, it actually worked. Because a couple of fires we had, it was like there was no flame come off. It was just like red coal, and like we're just like, this is where it's 28 degrees outside. We're like, this sucks. Like I think one night we didn't even do a fire. Or like,
Well, it was weird because it would be burning pretty good, a small fire, but it would be burning pretty good. And we'd start messing with something because it took Jacob about 3 hours to unload his truck.
Greg. That
And
was only
it-
because the pine coals we was
Yeah.
throwing on there.
Well, I'm talking about the previous nights. It would burn for a while, and we'd turn around and look, and it was just no flame.
Yeah.
So we'd have to go start blowing it again, throwing pine needles, pine cones on it.
Yeah, I said what we needed is a leaf blower, and then somebody said Jacob's got a fan, and
Yeah.
so we brought it over there, and man, it did good.
Magnificent fire.
I said it's probably gonna just dry the wood out before it actually caught on fire.
I got to say, I didn't expect my coldest night of any state I've camped in
Well, you're also
to
on an
be
air
the
mattress.
deep south. Campton, Nebraska, Wyoming, freaking Colorado. And the coldest night of camping I've ever had was right here.
roll tide.
Well done.
Ah, yes, sir. Yeah, Chris. That was so funny. I get in the tent last night, and Chris like rolls over. He's like been in the tent for like 10, 15 minutes, and he's like, "How cold is it supposed to get tonight?" I'm like, 25. He's like, "I can't believe the coldest night I've ever camped, temperature-wise, is in Alabama." And then he just
nuts,
rolls back
man.
over and goes to sleep.
I had my bibs and everything on last night. I wasn't screwing around. We were making sure we were staying warm, and I stayed warm.
Me too.
You
Oh,
didn't
yeah,
have a
no, my
sleeping
bad.
bag,
Yeah. Talon had to sleep in his truck with just his camo on.
You didn't have a sleeping bag?
No, I forgot at the house.
You were. Wow, that's what you meant by not being prepared. Oh my God.
Yeah. See, my body was fine, but like 12
mind
o'clock, my
wasn't?
toes,
Is that where you're going?
my toes got cold, so I wrapped my puffy around it and my Carhartt jacket. Good the rest of the night.
At least y'all got that. Mine's still in storage, all of mine. I'm just rolling with nothing.
I won't do it again.
We all got beds tonight. Well,
Yeah.
we do.
Yeah, back to the air mattress we go, baby. Yeah, no, it's fun. Anybody got any kind of final thoughts on the trip or anything? I think it's been pretty fun, but
fun.
As of the time we're recording, some of us will be hunting a couple more days. Chris, you leave out tomorrow.
Yeah.
Greg, you leave out tomorrow. So last little hoorah for you guys. any final thoughts from you two?
I think we're gonna go surround that deer that Shane saw.
I was thinking about let's go wolf packing, dude.
He's not going back in there, so we're just gonna go surround
Y'all
it.
go.
in the morning.
Y'all go kill that one.
Okay.
Hey,
That'd be slick.
y'all just get down through there, and I'll just run through
There
there.
you go.
Yeah.
I can't-
Yeah, he'll
I can't shoot. I'll be
Because
here.
he's tagged out.
Yeah.
You'll
Yeah.
take your
Archery
airboat in
deer
there and
drive.
you need it.
I'll help out the drive.
Yeah, no, awesome. Well, sweet. Well, yeah, it's been a fun trip. I'm excited to kind of see if anything we've learned tonight, especially with Shane talking about the bucks are running towards the water and staying towards the water. Maybe we just all sit on the riverbank and see if we kill one in the morning.
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna work for me.
No, you just go scout for us.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, well yeah. Where you're gonna be at, it's not like that at
Got
all.
no water.
No water.
Water.
No deer either. I don't start seeing deer until I get to the bottom of the mountain.
At least you're seeing them. you know.
Hey, I went down to pull my cell cam, and I get to the bottom. I hadn't seen anything all day long. I get down there, and I've already seen 3 deer out in the wide open. I was like, I only been down here for an hour, and I got to head back up to the mountain for a couple more days before I see that amount of deer.
Well, we're not jealous, so.
Yeah.
What- oh, but did you have to real quick? Did you have to wear waders to go get the camera?
No, but I do have one boot that's soaking wet. But it's only because the back end, evidently I walked them off. Kind of like this right here.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it's leaking.
All right, cool. Awesome. Well, appreciate everybody listening to the podcast. Appreciate everybody watching the podcast over on YouTube. Thank you guys for joining and listening.
Thanks for having us.
We got some deer to hopefully kill. We need some wood to knock on and make something happen. There goes Shane. Shane will probably shoot one of them more. Let's just be honest here.
I mean, I'll miss another one probably.
Well, someone's got to scare one to death. You
yeah.
shoot at it enough, you might scare it to
Yeah.
death.
I might. That's a possibility.
But anyways, appreciate everybody joining the podcast, and we'll catch y'all back on the next episode from the Southern Outdoorsman. And remember, guys, y'all stay Southern.